idea. Yeah, apparently both of us are
We are on live.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right. So if anybody is watching the stream, just give me a moment. All right. So for those who might be watching right now, could you please show some sign in the chat? Give us a +1 if you can see and hear me. Just the usual logistics. So I'll just maybe start this off while we are waiting. Thanks everyone. So we received some questions from the Google form that was shared. So let's maybe go over a couple of those first. But in the meantime, those of you who are here, yes, very good evening to everyone. I think this is a especially good evening um, with history being made at Olympics and so on. So I suppose we could congratulate ourselves. It's a happy time.
Oh, which result came?
So sorry, I think we have the first Olympic gold in javelin today. So
okay, nice.
Yes, and I think this is the highest ever medals tally overall, because there was also a bronze. I hope I get the sport right. I think in wrestling earlier today. So I think we have 7 medals, which is the highest ever.
Nice, amazing.
Yeah. So and came very, very close in golf. I think 4th position again, probably the closest we have ever been. So yeah, I think it's definitely been a good run. Hopefully the momentum carries over to, I guess it's Paris in 2024, I guess. Yeah, all right. So I should be careful about saying some of this on record because I usually sometimes get them wrong, but I'm sure people in the chat will be happy to correct me if I recounted anything wrong there. Anyway, so cool. I think people are able to hear us and see us. So I think, so Arjun, do you have access to the sheet as well? Or I could drop a link in the chat, I think, yeah. So, okay, so I think Rego has a couple of questions, so I'll just go over them. So the first one was, so I'm starting, I think, in reverse chronological order. So I don't know concepts like square root decomposition, segment tree, fan tree, and so on. Will I be able to solve the first programming assignment of week 1? And I think even I can answer that, I guess. And the answer, I think, is yes. You should be able to solve the assignment without knowing any of these concepts. But the previous question is, you need the knowledge of the, yeah, do you want to take that one?
No, I think even for the first question, I mean, definitely, I don't think square root decomposition, Fenwick trees, I mean, okay, they are almost the same. I don't think there's any week in this course which will require.
Yeah. In fact, that's
I don't
right.
think, yeah. I don't think it's a prerequisite at all. Square root decomposition, I think will be. No, I don't think square root decomposition is also involved in any of the concepts that we'll be taking up.
That would be right. Yeah, I don't think that this comes up in at least this version of the course or this edition of the course. So you don't have to worry about this at all, in fact, not just for the first week. But I think there's some number theory background that's being brought up in the question before that one. So Arjun, do you want to address that? Like, how do you imagine? Yeah.
So for number theory, yes. So we will need to know basic primality testing. By basic, I mean how do you find out whether whether an integer n is prime in square root of n time or square root of n time. Not something better than that. Just square root of n should be more than enough for all our applications. And along similar veins, factorization in order square root of n and sieving. I believe sieving is also no. Okay, if you know sieving, definitely great. But typically, differentiating sieving from square root and factorize, square root and primality is a slightly tricky case where we usually don't go to. So at least for this thing, I mean, I don't think even sieving is completely necessary, but it definitely helps if you know sieving. Again, just the most basic sieving. You don't need the fast sieving, any of those kinds. Apart from that, in number theory, you will definitely need to know modulo. By modulo, I just mean modular arithmetic, that is a plus b mod c, and how those things work. I just need addition, subtraction, multiplication. I do not believe we'll be getting into modular division. That comes under modular inverses, which is a fairly non-trivial topic. I don't think we'll be getting into that in this course either. So that is also not an issue. Apart from that, in number theory, I think you need to know GCD, Euclid's algo. And I believe that's pretty much it. Right? And just basic math knowledge of primes and how GCDs and LCMs and factorizations work. And yeah, so I think the number of factors of a number of devices of a given number. So these are not algorithmic concepts, but more like I would put them under basic number theory in math. Again, that's about it. You don't need to know like Gaussian function or anything of that kind.
Yeah, I think that kind of covers that. I'm pretty sure. Okay, so I think it's a bit too late to address the clash with the ICPC preliminary round. So sorry about that. The session will be recorded. I'm afraid I did not see this ahead of time. But nonetheless, yeah, the session will be recorded and we are doing these as of now every week. So we can always catch up later. In fact, we have also created a couple of voice channels in Discord. So again, if you're not already a part of the Discord community, please do join us there. And the TAs are usually online. One of us will also be happy to do a pretty ad hoc, informal live session like this one over audio at Discord if we need to quickly discuss something. That's always a possibility if there is enough interest at any given point of time. So, so yeah, I think that's out of the way. I suppose. Okay, I think we have discussed some of these questions related to, I think there are a couple of questions here from Suman about the relevance of CP in product-based companies, and from Alicia about competitive coding being necessary for what kind of companies. I think we have addressed a lot of this in the very first live stream, so I'd request you to please check that out if you want a little more discussion about such things and the role that this course might play in that context. Okay, so I think that leaves us with questions from Suraj Kumar and Chandan Yadav. So we could take them one by one. Arjun, do you want to handle Suraj's question here?
Sure. So the first question is for MLNA, is it okay to take Python as my pet language? To be frank, I have almost no knowledge of MLNA, but I believe Python is definitely one of the primary languages used. Neeldhara, do you have more information?
I'm also going to make an educated guess based on you know what I know from people who actually do work in these areas. It does seem like Python is a fairly common working language. I think in the closely related field of data science, R is also a very commonly used language. But I think when you're starting out, you couldn't go wrong with Python. And I think as your needs get more specialized, it's possible that you may have to train in other languages like R and MATLAB and possibly some other languages as well. But for now, I think the answer seems to be yes. It should be perfectly fine to work with Python. In the context of this course, I think Python should even be enough for competitive programming. So if you want to kill two birds with one stone by just learning and focusing completely on Python, I think that should be okay. So I think the next question is kind of related to that. Like, can you get to 5 stars with Python? I think we have addressed this in bits and pieces in other discussions. But Arjun, do you want to put this to rest once again, just to be sure?
Yeah, so I do think 5 stars should be reachable with just Python. Maybe 6 star and 7 star might be a bit harder. But again, I don't have exact data backing this up, but I'm fairly certain you can do 5 star. I mean, like 5 star, you just probably solve in a short context, you solve the first couple of problems, and you typically get to 5-star if you solve the first couple of problems in till 1. And I think that is usually doable.
Yep. And I think the third question was once again related to companies. And once again, I will refer you to the earlier, I think the very first live stream, and also the first video in the first week. I think we bring up some frequently asked questions. I don't remember if we addressed this one specifically, but I think a lot of these questions about choice of language and things like that are also addressed there. So I'd encourage you to go back and look at that if you have a chance. Chandan has 2 questions in terms of requirements for starting competitive coding. And again, I think we could possibly skip that one because, again, it's been discussed a few times by now. Again, if you start off with the first video of the first week, the first couple of videos actually, because I think in the first time that we solve a problem, we do discuss a little bit the overall setup and things like that, just solving your first problem. And the Discord community is also very helpful. So if you're stuck with something more specific than this general question of what are the requirements, I think people have dropped in and asked questions about their setup and things like that. And usually people are happy to help. There are, of course, other online forums as well, Codeforces, CodeChef, all of these websites have their own communities. And by and large, people are quite forthcoming. So if you have a question that's more specific than this, please feel free to ask on one of these forums for help. The second question, I think, is a little more tricky. And you feel that there's some concepts that you don't know, and why is that? And what are test cases and how to pass them? So Arjun, I think this one's for you if you want to tackle it.
Sure. So I'll take the easier concrete question, which is what are test cases? So you can think of test cases as basically different instances of the same problem. Okay, there are 2 kind of interchangeably used terms. One is test file and one is test case. So when you have a problem, there are going to be multiple hidden files on which your program will be run. Each such file is called a test file. But on NPTEL, this is also called a test case, I believe. At some point when you see your verdict, I think it says test case 1, test case 2. Think of that as test file. So the usage of test case there is a bit awkward. So let's just forget that it's a test case, just call it test file. Within a test file, we can have multiple test cases. Okay. So I think let's take the example of one of the week 0 problems, which was, I think, just given 2 numbers. No, it is finding the second largest, right? So I think there were multiple test cases there in a single file, which was, if I say in a file, I'm going to ask you 5 questions, right? So then there are 5 test cases in this test file. And like this, I might have multiple test files, right? And each test case is always independent of other test cases, right? So if I give you 1, 2, 3 and ask you what is the second largest number, and you say 2, then I don't just stop here. Then I say, okay, this you got right. Also now tell me for I don't know, 14, 12, and 20, and then you'll say 14, right? And then I ask one more such. The input will be different for the same problem, right? So I can have many such things, and all this can be done using one file, which is the input file, right? So these things individually are called test cases. A lot of test cases can be there in one test file, and there can also be multiple test files, right? So the way NPTEL works is if you are able to solve all the questions, all the test cases in one single test file, then you get some points which are assigned to that test file. Whereas inside a test file, even if there are say 10 test cases and you get 9 of them right, but one of them fails, you get a wrong answer somehow, or maybe you just get a wrong answer, then you don't get any points. Right? So to get any points, you should get all the answers for all the test cases in one file correct, and multiple test files, and you do each of them independently. I hope that answers your doubt. if you're around, Chandan.
Yeah, I'm not
Okay, I
sure
don't
if
see.
Chandan is around in the live chat, at least not yet. So meanwhile, yeah, I think about the previous question of gaps, I think I'm not sure. Do you want to add any comments about that, about not knowing some concepts?
Sure. So there definitely is uh, a knowledge base that you need to know to solve a lot of problems in computer programming. Um, and there are lots of resources in the intro video and in the I think one of the very earlier announcements which Neeldhara had on the platform Swayam. There are many resources which you can use to get your knowledge on the concepts up to speed. I think that is definitely something which is needed. It's good that you've realized that you have some gaps in your knowledge. So you don't need to. It's not like you need to know all the topics and then come and do computer programming. You can learn some of the topics. You can do problems related to those concepts. Then you can learn one more concept. Then you can solve problems in that and so on and so forth. If you're taking part in contests, you can try the problems which you think you're able to do it, and maybe at some point you'll hit a problem and you're not able to do it, and you realize it's probably from a concept which you have not learned so far. So then after the contest you can go and read up on that topic. Maybe it's some particular thing in graph which you've not learned so far. You go and read that, and then you come and try the problem again and some other problems related to that topic. This is usually how you kind of build your knowledge in computer programming. But there definitely is prerequisites in terms of knowing some certain algorithms and data structures to do computer programming. And this is not it's no fixed syllabus for computer coding. It's a very open and evolving field. But say for Div 2 in almost all platforms, there is around a certain number of topics that you'll need to know. That also will keep evolving. Some harder topics will get added uh, over the years. But I think it's a fairly it's a fairly known syllabus, which if you just look at any of the resources that I has posted, I think you should be good to go.
Yep, perfect. So I think, thanks, Arjun. I guess there are a couple of other questions that have just come up in the chat. Prince is asking which platform is the best, and Ayush wants some pointers. Ayush, I guess, wants some pointers on the second programming question of week 1. So again, Ayush, I think we had a brief discussion about this last week, but I don't remember if it was quite that question or not. So Arjun, I'll let you take over for these two questions here.
Yeah. One second. So where exactly is it on YouTube?
Yeah, I'm looking at the YouTube live chat right now. I don't see any explicit questions other than links to the course registration page, which, yeah.
Please step on the second programming question of week 1. Okay. I forget which question was given.
Yeah, I think we'll have to load up the second question. Just give me a second. I'm not sure if this was the one that required a little bit of number theory.
Correct. Must probably be that.
Are you sure you're also on the Discord community?
Okay. Oh, so this was the good prime numbers. Good prime numbers are prime numbers which have a number is good. Sorry, a number is good if it has an if the number of devices is an odd prime. So are you sure this is a kind of like an ad hoc problem? Yeah, odd prime, correct. I would say that there is a small observation that you need to do, that you need to understand. So think of this as, I did read up the hints mentioned, but I'm still saying. Okay, I'm actually not sure what exactly the hints were. So I think the kind of hint I had mentioned was that you should uh, try to first solve this as a math problem. So think of it, forget algorithms or forget how you would code it or anything of that sort. Just work with pen and paper and think of it from a slightly mathematical perspective and try to come up with um, try to understand what exactly a good number is. When will the number of devices of an integer be an odd prime? Right. So see if you can come up with some characterization of such a thing. So obviously, one characterization is, by characterization I mean kind of like a definition, right? So one definition obviously that is what is given in the problem, that the number of factors should be an odd prime. See if there is some other definition you can get for this, because finding the number of factors. Okay, so first of all, you should try to understand. So given an integer, do you know how to find the number of factors of that integer? So I think this would be one. This would be the first question you should ask yourself. If you already know this, great. Then I think the observation should be fairly easy. If not, think of this for some time. If you're still not able to get it up some 15-20 minutes, just go Google search this. There are lots of things, lots of resources to do. This is just a math problem. Right? The number of devices of a integer has a kind of like a formula for it, which is slightly intuitive, and I think it should be fairly easy to understand as well. I don't want to get into the details because then the problem becomes, I kind of give away a lot of the problem as well. So I think the first step is asking yourself what is the number of devices of a given integer. Think of that. That is kind of a prerequisite for this problem. So once you have that, then ask yourself, okay, now that I have this knowledge, now can I characterize good numbers? Yeah? So think of it from that perspective. Then you'll basically get a nice small observation, right? So a number is good if blah blah blah. Right? So what is this blah blah blah? And then this blah 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 is easily codable in some sense. So yeah, so I hope that kind of makes sense, Ayush.
So Gaurav, I think, has a follow-up or related question. Was able to solve for up to 10 to the 10, but for values more than this, there's a TLE.
Okay, great, Ayush. So Gaurav, yeah, I think this is also a thing which we had discussed last time. So I think the constraints given where n is up to 10 power 12. So even 10 power 10 would probably be a bit hard for you if I understand, if I can guess what you're doing. So I think this is also related to a question which someone else had asked. I think Tech Giant had asked a similar question, which is, ma'am, I always fail to optimize any TLE. One thing to remember is that just because you get a TLE, it does not mean that it is just a code optimization that you need to do. Very, very often, it is an complexity optimization that you need to do. That is, you need to first think of what your time complexity is for the algo that you coded, right? And then plug in the value of n to it and see if it is more than 10 power 8 or not. Right? If it's more than 10 power 8, it's probably the question probably is intended to have a better solution, right? So if you have an order n solution for this problem and you plug in n equal to 10 power 12, then you get 10 power 12 steps. But 10 power 12 steps is way beyond what we can offer. We can usually offer 10 power 8 steps, right? That's kind of like the rule of thumb. So if you understand that your code is order n, then you should realize that because n is 10 power 12, this problem needs an algo or an approach which works in time faster than order of n, right? Maybe it's order of n by 1000, maybe it's order of log n, maybe it's order of square root of n, maybe it's order of, I don't know, n power 1 by third, something of these things. Right? So very often when you get a TLE, this is typically the place where you should improve. It's not just about optimizing your code, which I think is what Tech Giant was referring to. So do not think of it as just code optimization. The first thing to do is, I mean, ideally, you should, even before coding, you should have thought about this. You should have thought about what the time complexity of your algo is, and only if it is within 10 power 8, after plugging in the values, the max values, only then should you start coding. Otherwise, it's just a waste of time, right? If you have subtasks, then great, you will get some points. But if you're aiming for the full points, then you should have an idea of your time complexity very clearly. Again, so coming back again, so if you have a TLE, so the first thing to do is check your time complexity. That I would guess is like 95% of all TLEs which happen. The next thing is you have some code, you have some bug in your code, which makes it go into some infinite loop or something of that kind, or it's just a bug which is, I don't know, like a for loop. You're not incrementing an I plus plus, so it just goes into an infinite loop. Yeah, or you're not doing some I minus minus somewhere, so it's spending way more time than what it should be doing. These I think are the second most common reasons for the TLE. I think the least occurring commonly is these constant optimizations, using an array instead of a vector, using a map instead of a set, like slightly making your code some cache, or there are lots of tiny optimizations you can make. Like mod is a very heavy operation, so typically we should try to reduce the number of mod operations you do. That makes your code slightly faster. By slightly faster, I just mean like a factor of, right, from, if it's taking 2 seconds, it probably takes 1.5 seconds if you make use of dimension, or maybe 1 second. Yeah, there are some better things as well, but it's typically of this range. And usually the inputs which are given for problems are loose enough, and time limits are loose enough such that these optimizations should not make much of a difference. So I would definitely not recommend you to think of these constant optimizations. Think of time complexity optimizations, and then think of whether there's any bug in your code. Only if you're like super sure, then you should start thinking of like how to optimize your code in like lower level stuff. I hope that answers Gaurav's and tech chains. So Gaurav, I don't want to give the answer as to why 10 per 10 is really. My guess is that you have an order n solution, which is why up till 10 per 9, it's probably going, I don't know how 10 per 10 works. Maybe some combiner optimization or something of that kind. But yeah, I think you should the time complexity square root of n into n power 1 by c. Okay, that's interesting. So let's just, so if n is 10 power 12, what's going to be the square root of n is going to be 10 power 6, and n power 1 by 3 is going to be 10 power 4. So that's 10 power 10, right? So that is going to be 8, right? So yes, so you need a better solution than square root of n into n power 1 third. That's actually interesting. I frankly do not know what exactly your alpha is. But yes, at least time complexity wise, it does seem to be suboptimal. Yeah. But I think you're very much on the correct path. Maybe just spend some more time trying to think of the observation that you have and apply it better. I think. Are the test cases random for each submission? Because submitting same code, I'm getting different results each time. Learn to code, no, definitely not. The test cases are constant. If submitting the same code, you're getting different answers, it's usually because there is some kind of randomization or what is the word? Undefined behavior in your code. Maybe you're accessing some you're accessing some a of n when you've only declared up to a of n minus 1. So those can lead to some undefined behavior. Sometimes that might get sometimes it works, sometimes it might not work. Typically, that is the reason for getting different results when you submit multiple times. The other reason is if your code is if the execution time is on the border. Say the time limit is 2 seconds and you're taking something like 1.9 seconds. This 1.9 can fluctuate from 1.9 to 1.95 to even 2. So sometimes you might get a TLE, sometimes you might get an AC. But that again is fairly rare to get exactly in that border range. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just for the record, there was a discussion on Discord, I think initiated by Zeno at the time, where he did get different outcomes, one of which was AC on back-to-back submissions of the same code. But I would also say that that's quite unusual, but there could be a very, very rare circumstance where there's a server-side glitch or something like that, and you may have just had some bad timing.
Sorry,
but
what were the different verdicts?
Sorry, what were they?
What were the different verdicts?
So I remember he said that his code finally got accepted, but it was TLEing before that. So he said he didn't make any changes in his submission. I think this is fairly unusual and would typically not happen, right? So I think
yeah.
So I suppose so. I think I've seen this kind of behavior like once on a different platform as well. So it's not, I think it's not completely out of the question, but it's definitely not typical and not something that we would have to worry about. So test cases are constant and yeah, different behaviors on different runs would. It's also conceivable that if it was even between a TLE and a AC, it may have been this on the fence kind of behavior that you are referring towards, and I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean,
but yes, I do agree that there are these even rarer cases of the platform failing, like the checker failing and giving a TLE. I know for a fact that on CodeChef it does happen from time to time. Like by time to time, I mean like once in like 10,000 or a million submissions. The kernel kind of just goes nuts and gives the TLE, even though it should pass in like 0.1 seconds. It does happen, but it's super rare. So I would not be worried. I'm fairly certain NPTEL should be taking care of things such that it is fairly stable. But I'll definitely look at Zeno's code as well. I haven't looked at that yet.
Sure. Yeah, I hope I'm remembering that right, but that's how I recall it. I think there's a comment about GCC optimizations. I'm not sure if GCC optimizations would help the kind of running times that Gaurav was sharing. I think you need to dig a little bit deeper than that, no, Arjun?
Correct. Yeah. So first of all, GCC optimizations, I mean, those are the kind of constant optimizations that I was talking about. True, it does help in some cases quite significantly, but we definitely do not need to get into any of those. In fact, I would discourage you from using those things because the aim of this course is not just to get an AC, but to understand what you're doing and learn, right? So all the problems that we set here do not need these low-level optimizations and so on. So don't use easy optimizations if you are very fluent with, I don't know, the threading, and I frankly do not know much about these extra optimizations which are out there, but I do know there is pragma and quite a few things which you can do, but you definitely do not need those to solve these problems, and I would discourage you from doing that actually.
Right. And I think the specific context of this course, I don't think we get to call the shots on how the compiler is invoked on the server side, right? I mean, I guess
yeah, so that
general,
so there are some things which you can do in your code itself. So you can you can't change the flags, but there is some things you can do, like pre-compiler instruct.
I see. So you're saying that it's not worth their while to bother at that level, that kind of low level.
Definitely not.
Yeah, makes sense. Right. So, okay. So yeah, I think it's good to know what you don't have to worry about kind of eliminates a certain kind of effort. So that's very good. I think there's a question further up. While solving long challenges, how can we know which topic has been asked, whether it's DP recursion or tree, will it come with time? This one's from Daulesh Godbole, as I said, from previously in the live chat. So Arjun, do you want to elaborate on this?
Sure. So it's not just about long challenge, it's about any contest, or for that matter, any problem that you're looking at for the first time. How do you know which topic it has been in? So this was a question we kind of went in depth, I think last week. I would recommend that you have a look at it once, the recorded video there. I think the short answer is there is no simple answer to this. It definitely gets better with time. If you've seen a fair amount of problems, then when you look at a problem, you typically know, okay, it's probably going to be from these couple of topics, and then you try those things, and one of them clicks. Um, uh, Otherwise, there are some tricks you can look up. I mean, the first thing is you should try to guess what the time complexity is, looking at the constraints. This does have its downsides sometimes, and this is not something I would like strongly recommend. But if you're out of ideas, is something you can this is something you can definitely look into. So if n is say 10 power 3, then an order n solution is probably not what is expected, right? Because if there's an order n solution, n would be like 10 power 6. So if it's 10 power 3, it's probably n squared. So it's probably not a simple linear greedy. So it's more probable that it's probably some n squared dp than a order n greedy. I mean, again, there can be order n squared greedies that are definitely order n dps as well. But I'm just saying, I mean, if it's n square, it's typically greedies tend to be linear solutions, and DPs tend to be like quadratic and things like that. So that's one way you could try looking at it. And then you should always, in most problems, try to see whether, I think like one question you ask yourself is, can I model this as a graph? I think it's one of the first questions you ask yourself after some point. And if it is modelable as a graph, then life typically becomes easier because it's a lot more structured. Then of course there can be different ways of modeling it as a graph as well. Some of which can be helpful, some of which can make life harder. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say in this thing. There's no single short answer. Mostly comes with practice, and just trying different things.
Yep, thanks. Yeah, I guess that about sums that up. Yeah, I
So maybe we
suppose.
take the next question, which is
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yes.
yeah, sure. Bhupati, you're right. A lot of experienced computer programmers do have uh, a template which they use in all problems, and in this template they do have different optimizations. But still, my point is, given that this course is meant for learning rather than competing, right? So when you're competing in a contest, your aim is, I mean, not always, but one of the main aims is to get a better rank. But here the main aim is to learn, right? It's not whether you can get an AC using an, I don't know, maybe you're able to pass an n log cube n solution when the expected solution was n log n. But even if you're able to get an n log cube n solution, the uh, the point of the assignment kind of is not fulfilled, right? So you might, I mean, sure, it's definitely a good skill to learn how to optimize code using all these pragmas and stuff. But I think a more so a more vital learning experience is to actually just get your time complexity down to the expected optimal solution. Yeah, so I think you should focus more on that than on these small optimizations, which definitely are significant in some problems, no question about it, but they're not significant enough to change the time complexity drastically.
Correct. So I think this question about hint for the first programming assignment of week 1, that's different from the one we have been discussing, right? So
check that as well. Okay, you're given these. Okay, AI. Okay. Um, okay, so this again is something which we had briefly discussed last time. Um, so if I remember right, my kind of a vague hint was uh, first focus on one element and see what constraints it provides. Right. So if you take AI and AI has to be equal to this IS by. Okay, it's hard for me to read in this HTML. Give me a minute. Yeah. So you know that AI should be equal to floor of IS by K. Okay? So from this one single AI, there is some information you can extract uh, about the range. Uh, so then you kind of first just think about this. Just think about what information does AI tell you, and then you get this information for different AIs, and then think of how you would combine all these informations to get one final range. Yeah. So how exactly these different informations interact with each other is something you have to think a bit about, and then you get the final range, which is what the question is asking for. Um, so I think the first step is forget that there are n integers. Think of just n equal to 1. That is, we're just given a1, then find the answer. Yeah, and then it's just a matter of combining the answers for different things.
Yep. I think in the next week's live stream, we can actually go over solutions. I think by then the deadline for submission will be behind us.
Right. So what
And
is
we
the
could,
deadline? 15.
I think it was 15th or 18th. I don't,
Okay,
I
no,
think there was an
definitely not
extended.
14. Yeah, so it's after
Yeah,
14.
yeah, I think even 15th would be, yeah, would put us in a position where we can't discuss the answers next week.
Correct.
But the week after that, I think we'll be happy to share some sample solutions as well. And I think through the Google form that was circulated, I think we have already started receiving a few solutions from those who have successfully tried out the assignments and have, I think, given us code with explanatory comments and documentation. So to
Okay.
everybody who has done that, thank you so far. And you're welcome to continue doing that. I think it will evolve to being a very nice resource. Once the deadlines are over, we will be able to share these. As well as I think, wherever we don't have the solutions from the community, I think we will be able to also share the official sample solutions. So, and we could use the time in the live streams to discuss the approaches in whatever non-code language, I guess. So if anything is not clear, or in terms of, how would you come up with an approach like this, we could address some of those aspects. But for that, we'll have to kind of wait for a couple of weeks. So yes, so with regards to week 2 programming assignments, I believe, Arjun, maybe you could tell them about the deadline and the fact that they're perhaps up.
Yeah, so the week 2, both the problems should be public now. You should be able to see them. And the deadline is 25th August. The one catch is that in one of the problems, you will not be able to submit using the language C for now. C++, Python, and Java are enabled. C is not yet enabled. We'll work on that and we update once that is also fixed. It should not, hopefully not take a long time.
Right. So do these, either of these problems have subtasks, Arjun?
Yeah, both of them have subtasks.
Okay, great. Yeah.
The subtasks are within the same problem. So you
I
just
see.
get scores based on how we do. It's not different problems. It's just one problem with explicit constraints for each subtask.
Makes sense. Okay, great. So Yeah, we'll, I think, post proper announcement through the mailing list as well as on Discord shortly. But yeah, if you can't wait, I think you can just log into the portal and you should find the assignments waiting for you there. That's not the case, do ping either of us on Discord and we'll try to follow up to see if there were any glitches, but they should be live as of now. Okay, so I don't see any further questions, right? Do you spot anything, Arjun?
No,
I think we have addressed.
no, I did go through everything. I think we've covered.
Yeah. All right. So I think, yeah, I'm just going to blabber for a while because of this lag that YouTube has. So in case, okay, great. So the problems are visible. So that's awesome. Enjoy. And I guess, yeah, since I probably don't see anything else, of course, if there's a question that you had and you were not able to ask it during the session, comes up later, then please post it on Discord and we'll take it from there. If it's more suitable for being addressed in a live stream like this one, we'll be sure to take it up next time. But in the meantime, thanks for joining us on a Saturday evening. Enjoy the rest of your evening and thank you so much. We'll call it a wrap here. Yeah.
Thank you. See you next Saturday.
Thanks and bye for now.